Welcome to the Three Tomatoes Virtual Renewal Summit. This is our fourth summit, but the first virtual one. The event is co-hosted by Ann Akers and Cheryl Benton. You'll be inspired, informed, and motivated by our fabulous lineup of speakers and panelists. Here's to thriving in midlife and beyond. But first, a word from our sponsor. I'm Cheryl Benton, co-host of the Renewal Summit, and I'm honored to introduce you to our sponsor for our COVID-19 panel. Ed Shulman is a retired Chief Master Sergeant from the New York Air National Guard and a Marine Vietnam disabled veteran. Ed is chairman of Operation Warrior Shield, a nonprofit that's doing very important work for service members, veterans, first responders, and their families. And our Renewal Summit co-host, Ann Akers, who's a veterans advocate, is also on the board of this wonderful group. So thank you, Ed, and please tell us about the mission of Operation Warrior Shield and some of your services.
10 years ago, I met a wonderful man, a World War II P-51 fighter pilot on Iwo Jima. And he said, Ed, you got to learn meditation. So I did, thanks to the David Lynch Foundation. Bob Roth trained myself and my wife on the skills of the non-religious modality of transcendental meditation. And it worked. It did solve some of my issues that I had from Vietnam. And of course, the stresses that we have in life. So we traveled the world, Jerry, Bob, and I, and we brought meditation to the veteran community and the first responders. So in 2016, I wanted to be more focused, and I wanted to really concentrate our efforts on first responders and veterans. And I started Operation Warrior Shield and had the fortune to be introduced to Ann, and she's helped considerably in our movement. And our mission is to help our heroes to overcome their demons. And we know that stress is the black plague of the 21st century. Every day, every single day, 22 veterans commit suicide. And what's more appalling is last year we had 10 NYPD commit suicide. Our services start by letting these heroes know that we have a safe landing zone for them. We provide access to learn a skill that helps them to handle their demons. So that's what Operation Warrior Shield really stands for right now.
Well, that's terrific, Ed. And I also know that Operation Warrior Shield, that you are now also focusing on how to help our frontline heroes through the challenges of COVID-19 and the aftermath. And you've partnered with some other organizations as well. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing around that?
Well, our biggest asset we have is other veteran service organizations. These VSOs, starting with the New York City Department of Veteran Services under Commissioner Jim Hendon. So I worked with him. We worked with the Department of Veterans Affairs, the David Lynch Foundation, and myself and the team. We've been to all of these VA medical centers teaching meditation for over 10 years, and more so right now when they really need it. These first responders really, really need it. We have brought all of these organizations into that safe landing zone, the New York Open Center.
Well, Ed, that is wonderful. And you're doing such important work, really. And I know many nonprofits are struggling now and struggling with fundraising. So tell us quickly, how can people help to donate to Operation Warrior Shield so you can continue your work?
Well, we have our website, operationwarriorshield.com.
Thank you so much for the great work that you're doing, and keep it up. Life After COVID-19 is moderated by Emmy Award-winning television journalist and media presentation video coach Jane Hanson, who has spent over 30 years helping people learn to communicate better. The panelists are Guttler, Cotter, and Judy Miller.
Everybody to this virtual panel, the first time I've ever done the Renewal Summit this way, but it's kind of cool because I've got a great bunch of guests with me today, and we are going to attack the question of the decade, the year of the decade, I'd say even the question of this new century. What are we all going to do, and what are the after effects going to be of COVID-19? We've all, in the last few weeks, we've all been in quarantine or isolated. We've talked about the fear of the unknown, the uncertainty of what's actually going on, the fear of the future. There's been loneliness. There's so many things that we've all been going through and experiencing. And I guess the question becomes, what happens when we're actually free and able to go back and kind of resume a quote unquote normal life? How are we going to live that? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I want to introduce you to this wonderful panel that I have. Judy Miller is the managing director of EQ Leadership Group, which is a boutique firm that includes executive search, coaching, and M&A integration. So guess what she's talking about? Careers, work, jobs. How do we go from all remote back to half remote to whatever happens? How about finding new work? She's going to have some great ideas for you today on that. Ross Guttler is the CEO of the Open Center in Manhattan, which is the country's longest running urban holistic center. Now, the thing about Ross is that he has this history of combining meditation, creativity, and problem solving with, some of the most famous and some of the most well-known and biggest company executives that we have in the country, and frankly, probably even in the globe. So he's able to take all of this and help people now and guide them through what's going on. And what's really cool about Ross's organization is that he's just launched New Yorkers for New York, which is a free public service to help those that are struggling with the effects of COVID-19. And Ross, I have to tell you, we are all so grateful for what you're doing. And we're going to really get in and give more details about that in just a minute. So
I appreciate that very much, Jane. Thank you.
And of course, you're going to get some help from Brett, who's up here in that corner. Brett is the founder of Stress is Gone, and he's also the author of The 3 Keys to Managing PTSD. And he offers a number of ways of helping people, one-on-one, group settings, meditation. Obviously, virtually everything is online right now, but there's so many things that he's working on in this whole line. And like I said, he's going to be helping Ross in the Open Center. So I really, really, really want to start with this big question, which is, what are going to be the after effects as we ease out of the COVID-19 situation and we get into what's going on with the rest of their lives? And Ross, take it away.
I get to start on this, huh?
You get to start because it's a big question. So there you go.
I think right now it's interesting, and I'd be interested to hear the flavor of conversations that everyone on this call is having. It seems to me about every 2 weeks there's a shift in flavor. 6 weeks ago, not everybody had even shut down yet.
Right.
And I remember we made the decision at the Open Center on March 12th to shut our doors before de Blasio said we had to. And, it's crazy to look back and think how stressed we were making that decision for basically 48 straight hours. It was like we were in a crisis room. And then 3 days later, it was like, oh, of course. It has shifted now toward when can we reopen and what is reopening looking like? And I don't just mean for us. I'm in constant conversation with a lot of the other retreat centers. And while we're in the city and not a retreat center, so it's a little different. We can have people that are in small groups. It's tougher for some of the other retreat centers. We're thinking about what is the nature of gathering in 3 months, in 6 months, in 12 months. And then, so when you ask me something like, well, what does this look like on the other side? I think, what will people be comfortable with, irrespective of what are the laws and legalities around gathering? For us, just, if de Blasio says, okay, you guys can have groups of 10. I mean, we're not going to open up our doors just so we can have groups of 10 people. We have a 20,000 foot facility. It wouldn't make any sense.
Right, exactly.
And we don't want to put people in danger anyway. So I think what we're considering is how long this goes on. Will it shift people's appetite for different styles of gathering.
Well, I hear people saying all the time to me, I'm not going to the movies. I'm not going to a sports game. I'm not going to church. I'm not going to the synagogue. I mean, they tell me all these things because I think they're worried about it. And some of what, for example, some of the work that you do, Brett, involves speaking to large groups of people. And you've done a great job of going in and talking about your services and that kind of thing. But how will that change for you, do you think?
It changed on day one. Basically starting our online Ring Central meditations every morning. People just download the app and log in with the meeting ID, and then that's Monday through Friday at 9, and then we do a Tuesday, Thursday 45-minute class, which is like a mini version of my corporate stress relief class. And then we have a 1-hour workshop on Fridays at 1 for like first responders, which goes, even deeper. So I wasn't doing that before, this happened. And it also motivated me to do something that I wanted to do for 10 years, which was do an online course. So I'm in the whole process of designing that and implementing that and launching that. So I'm hoping this summer that will be out. So basically it shifted from me going into corporations or talking in front of groups of people to, hey, let me get this online live and scale it quick for anyone who needs it.
But I know one of the things that is of concern to all of you is this kind of lack of information or the confusion. One day you've heard this, one day you hear that. And I can't believe that any of that is going to end anytime soon. Even if when we're all back kind of at work, there's still a lot we don't know about this. So Brett, how is that affecting the people that you speak to?
The misinformation, and it's difficult to consume information at this point because it's so stressful. We've never encountered a trigger like this throughout our generation and probably generations before. So this is such a unique anxiety trigger where typically something will happen, your stress will go up to here, it'll go back down. But now this is just mounting and mounting and mounting as weeks and the months go on. So the media has been not helping the situation. I would say that the big media outlets that are owned by large corporations, it's too slanted, right? So what I found is if I digest 5 minutes of local news a night, and then if I want to get a global perspective, I'll look at Euronews and BBC Worldwide just for 5 minutes. And the news is so much more palatable and digestible the way it's delivered. So that's what I've been recommending to everyone in our classes. They've been doing it. They definitely feel a little bit of a sense of renewal and a little bit of the monkey off their back. Mm-hmm. It's just easier to deal with. And pick and choose a time of day that is good for you. So this news is on your terms. If you're just listening to the news in the background, every 20 minutes you're going to hear something shocking and it's going to like trigger your stress. And it's not fair to put your body through it and you're really like plugging into stress. So I suggest you unplug, right? And when you do plug into the right outlet for a short amount of time and then walk away, right?
Yeah, well, as a longtime newscaster, I find myself turning off the television and putting on music, or I have never watched so many movies and so many TV series and so many things like that in my life. And I think I might just have to continue doing that. But I'm also enjoying my walks. Judy, the thing that's really happening now, because here we are using Zoom for this, and there are hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people in this country that are using this as a way of working every day. Some of them really effectively, some of them not. What do you foresee as happening as we move forward and working remotely? How do people even know that they're being effective because they don't have that face-to-face encounters with their supervisors and or their peers or the people who work for them every day? How difficult is that?
It's difficult. And it's challenging, but there's a lot of strategies that you could use to make yourself. A lot of people actually are finding that they're more productive because there are less distractions and they don't have the commute time. But here's how I would address the question. First and foremost, and I even have a little challenge myself, but before you even start to build a presence at work, make sure that you are set up with technology in a good way, that your Wi-Fi works, that your computer works, that you have your monitor in place, and you have a real work setup. Because no matter how much you try, if that's not working at home, you're not going to be effective. So that would be the first strategy. The second is, if typically you want to have some kind of a presence at work, if typically you show up every day at 9 a.m., don't first log into your computer at 10 or 10:30. People see that. Don't not answer your email until 11 o'clock. You want to give an impression that you're there and you're on the job. And so you need a little bit more of physical presence. A lot of companies are doing things like having coffee breaks and virtual happy hours. And maybe you were the type of person that maybe didn't show up for that stuff because you were busy. This is the time when there's an opportunity to be visible, be visible.
Yeah.
And show up. If you work in finance, as my daughter does, and she has a very corporate look, you don't have to necessarily put on your most corporate outfit, or it almost would look funny for a guy to wear a suit and tie, but you're still going in front of the office and people are still going to see you. And I think even to Jane's point earlier when she was setting up the background, make sure your background looks so that you don't have bathrobes hanging in the corner, so that you have a good physical presence. But remember, at the end of the day, people are going to remember you through these times and the sense of humor and the resilience. But they're also going to judge you more on outcome, maybe than the process as before, because they don't see you.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point.
one important point that I really want to make, because a lot of people forget about this, very important, if you are in a client-facing position where you're dealing with clients, don't forget about your clients. Continue to organize virtual cocktail hours and continue to stay in touch with your clients, and then give the feedback back to your supervisors. And it's a way of just showing that you're more as productive, or even more so.
Well, I have a good friend who's a recruiter, and she told me, she wrote a piece the other day, and she told me that she's actually advising people not to grab the first job that comes along now and in the next few months. And I said, why? I mean, people are worried. They need to pay their bills. And she said, because it may be a mistake. We're all so anxious and we just want to work, or we just want to be, because we're afraid of the future. Do you agree with that?
100%. I think you gotta, even as hard as it is, turn down the dial on getting a job. This is your time. Nobody ever normally has this time. It's your time to really look at your LinkedIn profile. Really step that up, update your resume, and reach out to recruiters, but ask them questions. Not like, can I have a job? Just find out, where is the market? Where are you hearing is going to be the activity? And I really can't emphasize enough, this is a time to find out what skills people are using, what industries are going to come back, what are not. Questions, questions, questions. And take online classes. It's Greg that you said that you're giving more online classes. Find out skills that you always felt you were lacking and take advantage of this downtime. But yes, I agree with your recruiter friend, not the time to jump in, because we don't really know what the full fallout's going to be.
That's true. And what if you take a job that you don't really like and it turns out that industry's kind of fallen apart and there's something else and you missed a fabulous opportunity? I saw you kind of nodding your head in agreement when we were discussing this, Ross. So I'm wondering if that's kind of your thoughts too, because I know you're really much about resetting and rethinking.
Yeah, I have a question for everyone, especially for Judy. A lot of people, well, let's not say a lot. Some people may not have the luxury of waiting for job 2 or 3 to come along. I've got a few friends that didn't have a lot of savings and they've got mortgage payments to make and their spouse is also out of work and they've got children. So anything is better than nothing, especially if it's near where their income was before. My question is, going back to the technology piece, we've talked for the last 10 years about how technology has enabled work to bleed into our personal life, and it's taken our personal life away because now we can work anywhere. And I always think about, like, when I used after we had smartphones and I would go on ski trips, I loved, okay, I'm on a chairlift and I'm working. And I used to think to myself, well, the fact that I'm on this chairlift working is enabling me to be on the ski trip because I can still work. And then, you read a few years later, well, you're actually not getting a lot of the benefit out of a vacation when you work through your vacation. So my question is, as technology has enabled us to be productive at home, which I'll tell you, I feel as productive as I have felt in years right now.
Really?
Somehow with Zoom. I mean, even though I'm on probably 8 hours of Zoom calls a day, I would guess. And then there's probably another 4 hours of work a day. And I'm sadly working 70 plus hours a week when I'm definitely not normally at that level. Mm-hmm. Technology allows you to be like, oh, it's just one more thing. Oh, it's one more thing. And it's too many emails at 11 o'clock at night, which we all know is bad for our mental state of being. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to know is, Judy, what are you advising people that are thinking, you mentioned around, you want to show up by 9. You want to show people you're there. You also want to be productive and no one wants to lose the job. How do you keep from just allowing the increased productivity and the fact that you're nervous about keeping your job? How do you allow that to keep you from working 80, 100 hours a week?
Well, I think there's 2 parts to your question. One is, if you already are fortunate enough not to be furloughed and to still have a job,
right.
I really believe in this time, this is probably not the time to start reaching out and start looking, but time to take everything you can. Don't overdo it. I mean, don't, bombard your supervisor with emails, but be productive. Think of ways that you can be productive and also become much more adept at online platforms, which are collaborative. A lot of project managers now, they have Salesforce and Zillow and all these things where you can work collaboratively. So I think people are looking more so than ever for team spirit and team working. And instead of being judged on your performance by yourself, is how you worked together collaboratively. So that's the first part of your question. But what if you're not so fortunate and you are unemployed and you have bills to pay and you've just been furloughed? Do you really have the luxury of saying, well, this is not a good time? You probably don't. But a piece of advice I would give is that a lot of people, I could tell you, are not hiring retained search to fill a permanent position, but they still have a gap and they still have a space, and they are looking at freelance and contract work, and that may be a place, particularly if you're in sales. So things like that you can do and still earn some income and continue to network and better yourself. And if your dream job comes through in the middle of all this, that's amazing.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great? It's also interesting about what's going to happen to us, but something else that have been thinking a lot of, and Brett, I want to direct this towards you first, is all of these people that are the first responders, the nurses, the doctors, the firefighters. I know that you've done a lot of work, Brett, with an organization called Operation Warrior Shield, which really does work with PTSD, so you know the components of that pretty well. How are these people going to be when we ease out of this, 6 months from now? What are they going to be going through?
So a first responder, their situation is extremely different than anyone else in society. Their day is going into the front lines, right? Imagine if you have 2 kids and all of a sudden you have 20 kids in your house and they're staying there and they're all in crisis mode. So that's what a first responder might have to go through for 3 months, 6 months, it depends. After 9/11, there was the cleanup crew down at Ground Zero. After Hurricane Sandy, there was a lot of first response happening in Rockaway, Queens. I was a part of that. And first responders, it's the main thing is that they somehow pull in some type of wellness thing that they could do before they get home. So it could be, for 10 minutes in their car when they park before they walk in the door, just to do like a guided meditation that they like, or do some kind of breath work. And then also to be aware of what their heart is doing during the day, how they're breathing during the day, and then just to focus the best they can in getting their job done while breathing deep and slow. So that deep, slow breath is what we are in control of, and we can reduce our heart rate as we breathe deep and slow, okay? So I think if they are working on controlling their breath rate, which will bring down their heart rate, and then doing like a 10 to 20 minute meditation before they walk in the door, going back home, that's really important for them to take care of themselves. Now, if you have a spouse that is a first responder in all this, there's a book called The 5 Love Languages, right? And it's a simple questionnaire. It figures out how you receive love, right? So I recommend doing that with your spouse and really tuning into how your spouse can receive love, okay? And then when they walk in the door, making sure you're connecting in that way. Because to go back to that analogy, if you're used to having 2 kids in your house, now you have 20, and all of them are in crisis mode, they're all crying. That's what your spouse is dealing with 8 to 18 hours a day, right? So when they come home, they're spent. And the brain, our psyche is not built to process that every day. It will take months, if not years, to unload that afterwards.
Well, that's, I guess, kind of what I'm thinking, is because what you're suggesting is that as we go forward here, like after 9/11, for example, and after things like Katrina, it was months later when people showed up and we discovered that they were having a lot of underlying issues. I mean, not to mention things like cancer that was a result of 9/11, but there were also a lot of trauma that came out of that didn't show up at first. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm saying to you is, are we going to see 12 months from now those emergency room doctors flaking out?
You're going to see that. You're going to see nurses, doctors, staff. What I'm hoping is that the hospitals are going, because they're in healthcare, right, mm-hmm. that they'll be ahead of the curve and invite in all the wellness programs. And once this thing starts tailing off and is almost over, they're going to have everything in-house situated so that maybe it's the first 30 minutes of a shift is meditation, or the last half hour of a shift is like, it has to be integrated into their shifts so that they could slowly start to process this and start to let it go. It's going to take, minimally 6 months to kind of unwind it out of your psyche and out of your body. The anxiety just doesn't go away. So when they're home, let's say this is over and it's, 6 months out after it's over, things are going to trigger them because they have all this built up stress inside. So it could be their kids, it could be their relationship, their commute, it could be their supervisor. They're going to be getting over triggered. So job stress is going to continue to climb even after this, this first response situation is over. So that's what I would love for the hospitals to understand. They got to bring in the programs, the wellness programs, the real ones that work. So when they poll the nurses and doctors and staff and administrators and they say, is this working? They should be getting 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 10. They have to be implementing things that are being used and working.
Yeah. Well, speaking of wellness center that works, let's go to Ross, because I want to talk more about exactly what you guys are doing at the Open Center. I know that it's got, you've got a whole toolkit online, and this is exactly what it's designed to deal with, this trauma that, anxiety, stress that anybody's feeling. So talk to me about that.
I was going to ask Brett if he remembers his love language.
Yeah, it's physical touch.
You were high. Okay. Your highest in physical touch?
Yeah, physical touch.
Okay. Mine is a good transition of, I was 8 in acts of service and quality time and words of affirmation. And I think acts of service are really applicable to this conversation here.
Yeah.
Like, what are we trying to do at the Open Center right now? And Brett and I have known each other for a while through Operation Warrior Shield. So what we're doing is we had a relationship with Operation Warrior Shield for about the past year, helping veterans and police and fire and EMT. And we want to expand that actually to the MTA also. And the idea is helping the core of the city reduce stress and anxiety and just have a more peaceful existence. Because to me, that's how we have a more peaceful city. The people that run our city, if we can help them, we can help the city. fast forward to 6 weeks ago, we needed to transition to everything online. And so what we realized is we need to bring all those in the front lines into this conversation. What do we do well? What can we give people? We're a nonprofit, so we're not going to make a bunch of donations. We need donations. What can we offer people? What we can offer people is what we've been doing for 36 years in the city, which is helping people not only just discover themselves and have personal transformation, but heal in the moment. And that's what Brett's working on. That's why we're excited to have Brett join as part of our offering. So our offering is sort of twofold right now. One, we've created a toolkit, and it's free. You can download it in a matter of seconds. And that toolkit is a lot of great teachers, such as Brett, that are offering really easy to use, quick techniques that Brett mentioned. I mean, he really set us up perfectly for this of people need to be able to do things very quickly right now. So I've been talking to a lot of my friends that are in the medical profession, in hospitals, in Seattle, in New York, and in Boston, all hard hit areas, and asking them, what would help you guys most, men and women? What would help everybody the most? And they said, we don't have a lot of time. So anything that you're offering, we have to be able to do really, really quickly. And what I wanted to loop back for when we were talking about the news, my one friend in the ER in Seattle said, we try to remind ourselves not to look at our phones because the news is a downer. And we don't need to constantly be consuming the data on what's going on with the number of cases. So he said, some people are using the timers to keep their phone off for a certain amount of time.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just what you were saying, Jane, of like, we don't need all this news. 5 minutes a day is actually enough. Mm-hmm. You don't need to get the same story 100 times over with this 5% different flavor. So what are we doing? We are trying to say, we want to meet you where you are. We understand a lot of these people are not 2-hour-a-day meditators. In fact, some of them might not like meditation. Right? I like how Brett mentioned meditation and breath work, and there's other modalities as well. Whatever your flavor is, we want to give it to you in an easy to use, bite-sized, quick method that's understandable. And I think bringing this back to Judy's conversation, what can we do when we're at home? Let's say we're not a first responder or a frontline worker.
But we're still anxious.
Exactly. How do we prevent ourselves from working 60, 70 hours a week and skipping our own personal wellness? We infuse it in small bits during the day. So I can tell you personally, I used to meditate 30 minutes a day, every morning. I have not been doing that recently. But what I'm doing is I start most of my calls with 2 minutes of meditation. And some calls—
with the people you're talking to?
Yeah, our Zoom calls.
Uh-huh.
We do 2 to 5 minutes of meditation on, I would say, half my calls.
That's a really interesting
You know what?
way of thinking about it.
Totally changes the tune, totally changes the conversation.
Yeah. And Judy, I see you smiling because I bet you're thinking that's such a great idea, right?
Exactly. I would never have thought of it. You think of that as something that would be separate, but how about bringing it into a meeting when somebody, I love it.
And breath work, the same thing. Take deep breaths for 60 seconds in between your Zoom calls. It will change the dynamic of your next call. I promise you.
That is so interesting because what I see are people that are they're waiting for the call that says, you know what, we're laying you off, or so I see them doing, almost every friend of mine that is working their job from home, the same job, says they are working much longer hours, just like you described, Ross. So there's got to be such anxiety with that. Judy, beyond the meditating that they're talking about, what should people be doing, especially as we start to ramp it back up again?
Yeah, the one thing that I did actually, think about during these times is sometimes there's no shame in reaching out to a therapist or something during these stressful times. And that might be something that somebody might have considered at one time, but it's very hard logistically to get an appointment, to get to an office, to get to your office. But a lot of therapists now are offering online counseling. And I think that, that's definitely an option. But aside from that, again, to your point, Jane, I think you have to, when you work at home, try to figure out a start time and an end time. And there is no end time when you're at home and you're working. So you have to sort of discipline yourself not only to show up at 9 o'clock, but to leave at 6 or 7 o'clock when you need to.
Judy, you mentioned therapists, and I forgot to mention, Jane, the other half of the New Yorkers for New York public service, and that is Operation Warrior Shield is one of our partners. We also have another great partner it's a grassroots organization started by my executive coach, Dara Blumenthal, and it is a group of over 3,000 therapists and healers.
3,000?
Over 3,000.
Wow, that's a lot.
That have volunteered for free their expertise to any essential frontline, and they keep opening every week. They open it up to more people in New York to have one-on-one or small group sessions. So that you can access all that through NewYorkersForNewYork.org. They are our partner there. You come in through NewYorkersForNewYork.org, and you can find out, do you want the toolkit? Do you need one-on-one or small group sessions? All free.
That's fantastic. I mean, I feel like I should sign up right now because everybody's anxious. But I just had another thought, which is, what about all these children? I know that you've got a couple of stepdaughters that are teenagers. You've got a teenage son, Brett. I don't know about the rest of you and children, but they've got to be anxious about what's going on. How do we help them too in this time? I mean, my daughter was a little kid when 9/11 happened, and I remember it still haunts her. So what do we do about the children?
Yeah, I think when this first happened, well, we took our kids out like 2 days before the schools shut down. So I believe, I heard someone say that, I think it was Ross, that you guys shut down a day or two before. So we actually took our kids out because we kind of felt the urgency, and we just said, we're taking them out. We, wrote the principles, and then 2 days later, everything shut down. So in the beginning, they were like, yippee, summer's starting early. Like, they thought, my son did at least. And I was like, wow, these guys have no idea, what's going on, And then the online assignments started coming in. And I think the key in the beginning for us was having a structure, like the first 2 weeks was like unstructured. So with teenagers, I don't know how you guys were when you guys were teenagers, but I used to sleep until like 1 o'clock anytime I could. So the kids are sleeping later, and we're up later. So the clock was getting all screwed up. It got flipped in our minds, and like waking up late, staying up late. So we got on a nice structure, and we weren't like super hard to it. It was like, 9 o'clock, we're up, then we're going on a walk at 10. And then they're doing schoolwork from like 11 to 2:30, depending on how much time they need. Then we had a family activity. That could have been charades. It could have been, anything, doing Just Dance on the system over here, on the gaming system. And I think the key was having a structure, not being super tied to the structure like school, like with the bell ringing, but like everyone knows what we're doing at what time, and everyone's working towards that. And it has to do with physical health, like going for walks and hikes. We did a lot of that. Mm-hmm. Mental health, and going out into nature as a family was really healing. And once you touch nature and your feet are on the ground, you're walking up hills and rocks and stuff, you're not thinking about what's going on. You're with your family and nature, and that by itself starts to unwind all the stuff that we've been absorbing like sponges through the news and stuff. So that was key. And then also the emotional component too. The girls were getting into yoga, with Stephanie, and doing a lot of that. I've been doing a lot more of my own stretching and dancing as well. And then me and my son, we go to the last little park that we found, where we could actually compete one-on-one for basketball. And that's what kind of releases his built up anxiety, being able to play.
Right.
And being able to compete. So having that structure, somewhat flexible. The keys are mental, emotional, and physical well-being. And it strengthens like the connective tissue within the people in your family. If you could do that during this time, I think that would be very special, because the kids in our family, the people that we're quarantined with, everyone's going to remember what the heads of the household did during this time. Mm-hmm. This might be something that our kids tell their grandkids. Who knows? But the key is, if you take care of your own temple and you're clear as you can be with, letting go of anxiety, kind of seeing the way and the things to do for that day, that kind of like really strengthens and brings the family together, and it brings like new meaning to this whole experience. So we're not just little anxiety balls plugging into the media, getting worse and worse as the days and weeks go on. We're actually getting deeper and deeper in touch with ourselves and our family as time goes on. And that I'm hoping is going to be the gift when we look back through history and see this pocket of time that we're like, wow, a lot of, a certain amount of people introspected, got in touch with a deeper sense of what they want, what's important to them, and all the other BS of the reality shows and this and that and the other thing just kind of faded away, our tight connection to that. So really connecting to what's important to us. That's, one of the things that I hope that we'll see come out of this.
Well, I think you're very possibly right about that. But before, I want to explore that, but but the one thing I want to do is quickly go to Judy right here, because in speaking about young people, I've done some work recently virtually with a bunch of kids that were robbed of the end of their senior year of college, and they were robbed of a lot of help that colleges give them for finding jobs. And these kids are they're anxious, they're scared, they don't know what the future's going to hold, they don't know if they're going to find work, they don't know how to talk to people. And so I've been doing some online things with them, just role playing and that kind of thing with interviewers, etc. How hard is it on these young people who are just beginning careers and they're just stopped in their tracks?
Oh, it's a good question, and it's a little heartbreaking. And Jane, I thought a little bit what you said about your kids were young at 9/11, and my daughter was in 3rd grade, and it's a whole other thing when they're older. My daughter is now 27, and I feel that she's set on her career. But I remember, and I've been talking to people who've reached out to me, that the internships are very important in college. And you go through all this, and sometimes you go through all to get into an elite school that's going to help you, and you have internships. Some of them I know have gone away, but other places I have heard they're offering people permanent jobs if they have, just automatically, if they've already secured an internship, and even if it's done remotely. So there's good news and there's bad news. But what I will say is that everybody in the workforce is going to be understanding. They're going to understand gaps. Where I always say, okay, you're going to have to explain a gap to me on a resume. Nobody's going to have to explain a gap as to why they lost a job or
That's for sure.
So it's heartbreaking, but if I could see any positive to this whole thing, I think people have become, I think there's a culture that's much more empathetic, and people are much more understanding, and people are, who gets on the phone every time I speak to the people I work with, the first thing they say, first and foremost, how are you? How are you doing? How's your emotional state? We're going to become a kinder and gentler, I think culture as a result of it. But there are no easy answers, but I think everybody's kind of going to have to sort it out for themselves. And the internships are going to have to just change, in terms of where they eventually lead. I know for my daughter, that junior year in college was that was the internship that leads to the permanent job. That may change.
Yeah, I can see that. But both you and Brett just now said that you believe at the end of the day, there is a silver lining in all of this about the way we will start to treat one another, the way we get back to our families. I know I now do a weekly Sunday Zoom call with my brothers and their families, and we didn't used to do that. We were all too busy doing our own thing, and all we're doing is saying, hey, how are you? How'd you do out this week? Tell me something new. How you feeling? So I guess, Ross, back to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where we may go from all of this. Maybe it's allowing us to hit a reset button that we desperately needed. Ross, can you hear me?
Let's see.
Uh-oh.
I can hear you, but all the videos look frozen. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, now we can. There we are.
There it goes.
Oh, the beauty of Zoom.
Yeah. Well, I think Judy just said something that really resonated with me, and Brett was alluding to the same thing, was this idea of empathy. And you're asking, Jane, you know, how are we going to be different maybe as a population? And it reminded me of, I worked with a career counselor named Maggie Mistel 10 years ago. And she goes through a series of questions, exercises that you go through. And I remember one exercise was, if you were the wise man or woman in a village and everybody came to you and you could only give one piece of advice or one superpower, what would it be? And I said, the ability to fully sit in the other person's shoes.
Wow.
And I said, I think if every single person in the world completely dedicated themselves to understanding the other person, I don't think we would have it. I really believe it would solve every single problem in the world. I can't think of a problem it wouldn't solve. And I've tried, and I can't think of one. And
you're getting nods of approval here from everybody else. I will tell you this, that a very close friend of mine who suffers tremendous anxiety and has a really tough time getting through her days said to me, it's like everybody else in the world is now exactly like me, and I feel normal, which was a stunning remark coming from this girl who I know struggles so much. So I thought that was really amazing. I mean, a little shocking. So this feeling then that maybe we will find a pathway to have better relationships with people. What can we do to reinforce that after the fact, Brett, do you think? Because that's where the rubber hits the road, or whatever it's called.
I think I'm hoping it's going to slow down the pace of our society, you know, especially in New York City. Everyone is moving so fast, you know, things are moving so fast. We have to process so much just by walking into the city, taking a train in, and, you know, it could be overwhelming. I just think coming back to, imagine every person knew what was most important to them in their deep inside, and then their actions reflected that. I'm hoping that this extra time, it's almost like we have a long winter. You know, winter, you're pretty much in your house, especially in New York. You know, there's not too much to do when it's the snow on the ground, the weather's really bad. It's kind of like a time in, like, you know, the Native American sense, where it's like you're kind of like incubating, and you're kind of like letting the old things die, and then spring comes and it's like new life, right? But now our winter is kind of spread into our spring. So I really hope that we go even deeper to understand what is truly important to each one of us and keep our actions around that. You know, I feel like with all the information that's thrown at us, we just get moved over here and our mind goes in so many different directions. And, you know, 9 out of 10 of those things might not be that important. So going back to some of the things that folks are going through today, you know, with working from home and putting in a lot of hours, make your structure, have healthy boundaries with the structure of your own life day to day, starting now. So an example would be, if you stop responding to emails at 7 o'clock at night and you just don't look at them again until 9 in the morning when you're supposed to clock back in or supposed to be at work, is that okay? So you just, you know, your first half hour is responding to last night's emails. Okay. Yeah. But now you have your whole night to be with yourself, to be with your family, to do an online Tai Chi class, to, you know, I have like this bamboo stick that I run around the backyard with, doing like a workout with, you know, that's why it's fun. When I come in, I feel awesome. You know what I mean? So is there something you could be doing? Like Jane, you mentioned music. Mm-hmm. Imagine if there was like 40 minutes of not doing emails every night, and there's 40 minutes of doing what you love, you know, music. What is the energy in your body going to be like? What's your mind state going to be like? How much of a shield are you going to have around your inner self that's going to keep stress away? You know what I mean? If you're not digesting it all day long and all night. So I would say have healthy boundaries with your own inner sanctum, your own, you know, daily schedule, put what's important to you in the forefront. If you have a job and it's demanding, get your job done when those hours you're expected, 9 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever it is. But try not to let it bleed over. I would say give it a week, do an experiment. Give it a week, give an experiment and see how much happier you are. I'm just hoping that when we come out of this, we're more in touch with ourselves. And I just remember when I took a trip to Utah, every person that I said hi to, they were like, "How are you?" Right? And then they paused and they waited for me to respond. And I was like, holy cow, they actually really asked me how I was.
Question.
It took me a few days to sink into the flow of that. And not to say that New York would get there, but if you remember after 9/11, we had that. When we were walking in through the streets, people would look at each other, talk to each other, and just be in the moment with each other. So that, it's kind of gave me chills a little bit. If we could let that kind of spill out into our society, I think that would be an amazing thing. But the number one thing I wish for people is to be more aware of their own health.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at the people at risk, it's people with serious health issues and the 65 and above age bracket. So just imagine that if we became, in America, the most obese country in the world, that we became more health conscious and understood what was going on with our heart, our breathing, our anxiety, and just started to tune into that.
Right.
And I just wanted to share one quick tool regarding stress and anxiety, if it's all right. When you feel it building, I want you to embrace it with your breath, okay? And I'll give you a simple 3-step technique to do that. Whenever you're feeling tension, stress, or anxiety, if you're upset, angry, whatever it is, rageful, touch the tension in your body. For me, it's usually my chest, okay? Start breathing deep and slow. And then once per breath, in the back of your mind, I want you to say, "I'm okay." Okay? So you're breathing deep and slow, feeling the airflow moving in through your nose, opening up your sinuses, going down your throat, and you're touching the tension. That's really a big, important piece of this. You're embracing the tension with the calmness in your hands. So the calm cells are touching the tense cells. Then you're massaging that tension with your breath on the inside. You'll find within about 2 minutes that it unlocks and releases the tension from your body. Now, when the tension releases, the anxiety frees from your body and your mind clears. So that's a special technique that we call stress stopper breath work. We mentioned the breath work just before, and it really within 2 minutes activates your body's relaxation response. And anyone, please, that's feeling the anxiety, just master that simple technique. It's a lifesaver.
I already feel so much calmer.
Awesome.
I love it. Thank you, Brett. That was great. Judy,
Good.
we're almost out of time. Any last thoughts from you? I'm just curious about the workplace. Is the workplace going to become a kinder, nicer environment?
I think so. I do. And I think people have learned a lot from the experience in terms of interacting with other people. I think it's going to forever change. And I do believe that people are going to become much more adept at working remotely. Still will come into an office, but I think people have learned to learn skills and platforms that they haven't before. But I think we're going to come out of this better on some level. I just do. The ultimate optimist.
From your lips to God's ears. Ross, last words from you.
Yeah, well, listening to Brett, it just made me think, for people that are listening that think, well, if I want to spend more time accessing some type of creativity, whether it's Tai Chi or running around in Brett's backyard with a bamboo stick, whatever it is, some people want to know, how do I access that creativity? How do I get back to that childlike mindset? And for me, what Brett and I do every day, whether it's breath work or meditation, it really isn't just to reduce stress and anxiety. For me, it helps me remind myself what is important to me. We've all said, getting back to what is important. And so you might say, what if I don't know? What if I don't really know what's most important to me? Well, the techniques we're talking about, breath work, meditation, other things, for me, they not only bring my stress levels down, they help remind me, help unearth, oh my God, yes, that emotion was important to me. That thing was important to me. That memory was important to me. So you can do it in short periods. You don't have to, I feel like I'm evangelizing for this, but that's because I am. I love it so much. Don't feel like you've got to become an expert overnight. You don't have to do it for 20 minutes at a time. 2 minutes is fine. 30 seconds of breath work is fine. I promise you, you'll see benefits. So that's my message.
I love it. You guys have been so terrific with the advice that you've given, with the knowledge and the wisdom that you have and these tips. And people can find it a whole lot more we're going to have information that's going to tell everybody where to find out exactly how to reach all of you. But Brett, Judy, Ross, thanks so much for sharing your insights. You guys are absolutely terrific. And we're going to leave this panel by listening to the soulful songstress, Christina Connors. She's the winner of the 3 Tomatoes Got Talent contest, and she's going to lead us out with some inspiring and beautiful words. Goodbye, everybody. I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Jane.
I invite you to sit comfortably, close your eyes, and take a few slow, deep breaths. Breathing in slowly through your nose, and slowly and gently out through your mouth. On every breath, you can feel your body relaxing. Relaxing your shoulders, your legs, and feeling your chair supporting the weight of your body. Now see yourself at the entrance of a vibrant garden. You notice a small sign hanging on the gate door, and written on it, it says, Gratitude Garden. Gratitude is the magic ingredient of miracles and the key to enter into the garden. So take a moment to reflect on all the things that you're grateful for in your life. Maybe a cherished pet, a friend, your health. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so blessed. You can feel an energy rising all around you, and suddenly the gate starts to open. And as the gate slowly opens, you find yourself standing in the most incredibly vibrant garden. You've never seen colors so bright, blues and reds and yellows. And there's a beautiful rainbow in the distance. Your heart feels so full. Gratitude Garden is here for you anytime you need to be reminded of how much you have to be grateful for, no matter what is happening in your life. It is time to go. You leave the garden and go out the garden gate, and you close it behind you, feeling so relaxed. Take a calm breath in through your nose and gently breathe out through your mouth, feeling your breath in your body. And when you are ready, open your eyes and return to your waking life, knowing there's so much to be grateful for in this moment.